They will join us for a stimulating discussion on how recent trends and technologies are enabling startups to contribute to the success of future cities. From infrastructure to innovation, our expert panelists will share their insights on the latest trends around the globe and how we can create an environment for startups to thrive and boost the economy. Around the globe, the trends suggest that the role played by startups in building future cities is crucial, and from digital innovation ecosystem to smart and sustainable buildings and infrastructure, from city operation through AI and data-driven planning approaches to safety and security through AI and intelligent mobility, we will discover during this panel discussion the latest trends across the globe. I would like Omar Hamada to take the floor.
All right, hello everyone. Good afternoon. Hope you're enjoying the day today. There's been a lot of very insightful discussions. I'm particularly excited about this conversation in specific. And my excitement stems from two reasons. The first one is that this is a panel of very esteemed speakers from all around the globe. So they're not just going to be providing some valuable insights, but they'll be also providing us with very diverse insights about how the investment market looks today. And the thing is, the global investment market today is facing a lot of challenges. Today in this panel, we have a wide spectrum of speakers. So we have the government, we have the investors, we have the entrepreneurs. So we're not leaving here until everyone is synergized, synchronized, and we can get a solid overview of the challenges and how to overcome them. I'm Omar Hamada from Tech and Talk, and I'll be moderating this panel. And what we intend to do is to talk about the global investment market and to see the key trends in innovation and technology and in emerging markets, and what can startups do to achieve hyper growth and move from being in an idle stage to becoming unicorns. So how, for a standard startup in an emerging market or in a developed market, to move, to grow, and to expand until it becomes a unicorn. Now, let me start my questions with His Excellency, Mr. Amin Salam. So, in your opinion, sir, I want to see from your point of view, how can governments today support the growth of local startups and SMEs in a way that fosters sustainable, inclusive, and innovative economic environments? So, off to you, sir.
Thank you, Omar, very much for the introduction. Absolutely, when we talk about startups, we're talking about an entire ecosystem. And I very strongly believe that the government is where everything really starts, despite the fact that startups are born within the private sector, they grow within the private sector, but governments are the first platform that startups look at. You need to give them the right ecosystem, you need to give them the right tools, you need to give them the right structure, and most importantly, you need to help them, guide them, and get them to grow by providing the right facilities as well. That starts by a clear vision of the government. Then it turns into more a realistic approach where the government needs to work very closely to develop this environment, to develop this ecosystem along with the private sector. It's a very tight partnership where the government is responsible to give the right regulatory platforms as well to help protect the startups' growth. I will give you a small example as how we do support startups in Lebanon despite the severe economic challenges that our country is going through, particularly through the Ministry of Economy and Trade. We are very much engaged and responsible to help SMEs and entrepreneurs. And we have the Intellectual Property Office, which is the first entry point through the government into the world of startups and the world of SMEs, where we begin helping them registering their trademarks, registering their innovation, and registering everything that gives them the proper legal structure that gives them the protection to be able to flourish within the private sector. Again, I would say Lebanon today is going through very challenging times, but we have been working despite all the challenges, and we have been relying on very courageous entrepreneurs and startups in Lebanon, in the technology sector particularly today, putting hand in hand a lot of effort with the private sector and a number of the international organizations like the World Bank. We are working today on a program called the GATE project, which purely supports and creates financing facilities in a very innovative way, because as everybody might know what's going on in Lebanon, our banks today are dysfunctional. So we are creating financing facilities through a World Bank program that enables startups to be able to get financing. It's a very innovative and non-traditional way of helping startups, but we are putting tremendous effort as a government to make it possible. So most importantly, as I started with, is for the government to give the right structure, to help the private sector build the right ecosystem, provide the regulatory platform that protects those entrepreneurs, and as they grow within the sector, we have another role, which is promoting them internationally, taking them global. And we have successfully accomplished to get a number of unicorns in Lebanon to get into the regional market within the Arab world. We have a lot of collaborations with Jordan, Tunisia, the UAE, now as a government and as a private sector. Now we're expanding more into Qatar, Saudi Arabia, let alone what we are doing with Europe and the US. So for us, startups are really the light at the end of the tunnel today for Lebanon, because they will and they are the backbone of the economy, and we will continue to find creative and innovative ways to get them as a government to grow despite all the challenges.
Excellent, thank you. So regulations, facilities, and like His Excellency just said, when governments are struggling and economies are facing challenges, one of the key pillars that act as a foundation are entrepreneurship and startups. So they're the light at the end of the tunnel, and from that perspective, I'd like to move from the governmental point of view to the venture capital point of view. My next question is to Mr. Wang Xiaoji. Hope I'm pronouncing it right. My question to you, sir, as a president of a venture capital association in a massive market like China, you get to work with a lot of companies, a lot of startups who are seeking to become unicorns, many of which already are. So what is your point of view around the key areas of innovation that help them grow, the key technologies, trends you've seen working with them? And what strategies did you find the most efficient in helping startups receive the rounds of investment that they require in order to achieve hyper growth rates and scale exponentially? So, off to you.
谢谢啊，我用中文回答。因为这个问题也非常的大，非常的全。那么首先呢，我是刚刚呢从北美。
Sorry, I'll just interrupt for a second. We just need to make sure there's translators for everyone in the room. Translators? Can you ask her, please? We need that translator, please, for Mr. Wang. All right, just until they sort things out, I'm sorry, I'll have to change the question, just until the translator comes and changes the language into English. So I'll be asking my next question to the entrepreneur side of things. So Mr. Mehdi, as the CEO and founder of Finamaze, you have faced a lot of challenges in achieving that growth as a startup founder. So the world has been facing a lot of challenges, starting from the pandemic that affected especially startups in sustaining their businesses. And then came the different political dilemmas like the Russia and Ukraine war, which affected the economy and resulted in so many fluctuations recently. So my question is around the concept of unicorns versus camels. So everyone is now pushing startups to not just become unicorns, but being camels as well in sustaining their businesses. So what are the key strategies that you relied on and you advise startups and SMEs to rely on in order to sustain themselves under such circumstances and pass all of the consequences of these challenges?
Thank you very much. Well, perhaps in 2022 and 2023, the best path to grow and become a unicorn is to adopt a camel attitude. I will answer your question, but first I would like to salute my co-panelist, His Excellency Amin Salam, and I would like to salute the Republic of Lebanon, because more than 10 years ago, they were the leaders to foster an ecosystem and to encourage investors, particularly banks, by giving them a backstop, whereby the government is taking up to 70% of the risk of the investment. This allowed not only Lebanese startups to get the required funding, but it initiated a whole ecosystem with VCs that were able to deploy these monies that are guaranteed by the bank and by the government at the end of the day, in order to allow them to grow and test different technologies. So I don't think that we hear it often, but salute to Lebanon. To answer your question, I don't think there is a one answer that fits all the challenges or the way how things will be done. It would definitely depend on the economic cycle. So what we have seen in the past years, pre-COVID or around COVID, is that there was a lot of appetite that was basically going into these startups that were reinventing the wheel, that were here in order to compete with incumbents. And for a while, even for ourselves, we have been encouraged by VCs, investors, and different players in the startup environment to go directly, grow at any cost, get on clients, acquire customers in order to make the incumbents not any more relevant. And this happened somehow for some sectors. I'm thinking of the sector of the transportation with Uber and our local pride here, Karim, who indeed managed to build something out of thin air. Thanks to this mobile, thanks to this tool, indeed a new type of business was there. I could also refer to the largest hotel in the world, Airbnb, who indeed managed to become a real player, and they did it because they subsidized clients, because they offered a new UX, a new user experience to the masses, and therefore they were able to assemble all this firepower, and they basically become not relevant by becoming even leaders in their sector. If we go a little bit back further in time, Amazon is of course one of the largest market cap in the world, and indeed it did it by revolutionizing how things are done based on technology. So in the first cycle, I would say pre-COVID and around the COVID, the name of the game was grow at any cost. And basically, it was transferring VC money or the investments that the startups were able to collect into social media in order to acquire clients on the one hand, and also in order to subsidize clients in order to grow. And I do remember VCs telling us we want to see a growth of 20% month on month, no matter the cost. But then COVID actually was a chance for the startup environment because it pushed the interest rate to flat, to zero, or even to negative levels. And therefore, money was free. We had one of the biggest quantitative easing in the history of humankind, and therefore money was there, and it was for the startups to grab and for the startups to develop. But then we had inflation, and we had the Fed that was increasing the rates, and of course we are all aware what's happening at this regional bank in the US, whereby the increase in the interest rate, or I would say the fast pace at which overall the central bank all over the world have increased the rates, that actually changed the dynamism. And here the VCs were telling to startups, don't grow. We want you to break even. We want you to build a business that is sustainable. We want you to stop subsidizing clients. We want you to spend less money on the social media. What we want you to do is to generate revenues and to prove to the incumbents that you are here to bring value. And this is, I would say, the Camel attitude. It's not anymore, we as startups, what we do best is building tech, building the user experience, and being very much agile, flexible, and able to follow the different trends, and sometimes even create these fashions, create these trends. But the incumbents are here, and they have got millions of clients. I'm thinking in my sector, the fintech, today, you cannot build a unicorn if you don't team up with banks, if you don't partner with banks. They need us because they don't have this flexibility, they don't have this tech, they don't have this close experience with the clients, and they don't sit in the pockets of the clients. We do. But what they have is these millions of clients that the banks have been knowing since their birth. They have financed their studies, they are financing their cars, they are financing their houses, they are seeing what they are using with their credit card. And to answer your question, as a summary, yes, in order to grow as a startup, you need to become relevant, to become important in your ecosystem, not only to the end customer, but try to build clever partnerships with those people, with these big churches that already have got millions of disciples, to whom you can bring the tech that the bank may not be able to build by themselves.
All right, perfect, thank you. I guess now we're all equipped to listen to Mr. Wang. So I'll just repeat the question as a quick summary. So as a president of a major venture capital association in a massive market like China, you get to work with a lot of SMEs and startups and help them grow their businesses. So what are the key innovation trends, the key technologies that you see help startups grow exponentially, achieve their goals of sustainability and resiliency? And what are the key strategies in your point of view that would help startups raise the investment rounds that would help them achieve their targets?
谢谢，谢谢。刚才主持人也讲了，因为中国呢，正好经历了一个高速的发展的一个过程。那么在这个发展的过程中呢，我们作为中关村，在全球大家知名的这么一个创新的这么一个非常好的这么一个区域，那么我们一起见证了外部环境、内部环境、创业环境、政策环境一起来使中国呢有一个很好的经济的腾飞。现在大家都见证了中国这几十年高速发展，给世界带来了一个不一样的新的一个案例。那么我刚刚呢也是从北美到欧洲，从欧洲呢又来到了中东。那么现在呢，我确确实实感觉到，就这次中东的活动是疫情之后，可能是全球最热烈，而且呢可能是国际来宾最多，而且也是政府这种政策支持和这个我们参与现场很热烈的这么一个盛会。这个过程呢，很像是我们在 10年前这个中关村中国那个创新热土的那个氛围，所以呢，我感觉可能中东、阿联酋、阿布扎比这个区域呢，是一个下一步很好的创新腾飞的一个外部环境。第二呢，因为我们现在今天的主题呢是要打造独角兽，如何在变化中求发展。那独角兽的成长呢，实际上它还有很重要的一个原因，就是外部的环境。这个环境包括我们的政策、政府的支持，包括我们的科研，包括我们的人才、居住的环境，包括我们围绕着创业需要的营养资本的环境。那么这些外部的环境，有些是需要政府搭建的，有些是需要政策支持的，那么有些呢是具有天然的优势，比方说中东这里的阳光、沙滩、海水，很适合呢创业者在这里有一个很好的人文环境。那么再往里边，就是我们什么样的人，借助什么样的环境，如何的去创造自己这样一个独角兽，那么来形成中东这一片独角兽的一个沃土。我们呢从投资机构这个角度来去看，我们有2句话，一个呢叫大水大鱼，就是说你的海洋、你的水域足够的大，才能长出大鱼来。那么这个呢，对于投资者来讲呢，是这么看问题。那么对于我们创业者来说呢，那么你要想成为一个独角兽，首先呢，你在很小的时候，你的基因、你的商业模式就应该是大鲨鱼，我们叫鲨鱼苗，而不是很小很小的小鲤鱼。那虽然你在初期的时候看起来大家都很小，但是大家的基因不一样，所以你一定要有更大的市场空间，更大的市场需求。这个是我们投资的角度去看独角兽。第二个呢，我们还有一句话叫长坡厚雪，就是说你选择这个商业模式，是不是能给你的股东、你的投资机构能创造很长时间的持续的利润，那么使我们这个利润呢越滚越大，像滚雪球一样，能带来持续的利润。那么持续的利润从哪里来？那么实际上它得要求你的商业模式是不是经过了深度的思考，是不是有很强的技术的领先性，是不是有非常宽非常厚的护城河，这样呢你才能保证你能做到这样。回过头来再讲，那我们的创业者简简单单的说我只是一技之长，想做成独角兽是很难的。首先要与时俱进的去抓住，或者是敢于抓住别人不敢做的市场。像我们过去的独角兽，我们回头看过去，不管是中国的还是世界的，都是创造了奇迹。这种奇迹呢，一定是和时代、和技术、和市场的新需求结合的一个新的开始。现在呢，我认为是一个新的开始，因为我们非常多的新的技术在颠覆、在迭代我们的技术。大家看到了最近的 ChatGPT 等等的，包括疫情之后带来的大健康，这样的市场都是非常巨大的市场，是一个刚刚打开门缝的一个市场。第二个呢，就是说，那你作为一个创业者，你有没有这种影响力、领袖 leader 这种影响团队的能力，影响市场的能力， 改变世界的能力。我们现在看到，就是说这2年，现在的独角兽估值最高的，像马斯克创造的是吧，他的星链科技，都是颠覆了一个国家的这个行为，国家想做的事情，他敢于想，敢于做，这个呢也要有很大的勇气和胆量。当然，背后一定要你有很强大的逻辑能力、商业模式的打造能力，还有资源的整合能力、团队的影响能力。那么，创业者从内功到政府的外部环境，以及到整个国际大的这种气候的环境叠加在一起，才能产生我们伟大的独角兽。现在看来，在中东这个区域，那么政府、资本、自然环境，包括我们的区域位置都很好，有可能下一个热点的地区是在这里，大量的独角兽会在这里产生，但是需要我们资本方、政府、创业者、技术一起来努力，这里可能会一个是不一样的天空。我先分享到这里，谢谢。
Great, thank you very much. So these were valuable insights about key areas like globalization and building a living environment that actually helps startups to thrive and grow and scale their businesses, and how venture capitals and companies and governments can work seamlessly together to build that type of innovation together. Now, my next question is to Mr. Nathan. As the senior head of unit at the European Investment Fund, you get to oversee investments worth billions of dollars all around the globe. So in SMEs, in startups, I want to know from your point of view, what are the key industries that attract investors and pose a massive opportunity for them and for startups to thrive in? And I know you have worked a lot in startups that work towards future cities and smart cities. So what are these industries from your point of view? What are the opportunities that exist there? And where can we locate them? So off to you. And I'd apologize for all the speakers. We just need to manage the time. So let's try to keep the answers to the point. Thank you.
Thank you very much. A pleasure to be here. I'll make it a short answer to encapsulate what's going on in Europe with respect to the investment outlook, with respect to small and medium enterprise in particular. So the European Investment Fund is not directly investing into startups, but we have a very kind of distant view of what's happening in the market, deploying 6 billion euro every year into 150 funds, private equity and venture capital, that themselves are investing into a small and medium enterprise. So I would say in terms of trends, first of all, we are after best practices. So we're looking at companies that are backed by funds, that are ensuring that they are establishing the best processes and best banking practices in order to manage their investment properly. So we are expecting a thorough due diligence to be made by the fund manager we back up to make sure that they invest into companies that are sustainable, that have impact, and that have already gone through some level of digital transformation. In terms of sector, at the moment we have been pushed to invest a lot of money into healthcare. I think this was accentuated by the COVID crisis, where we realized that there was a lot of improvement to be done. But moreover, we have a duty to push for democratization, so accessing, or giving access to investor to growing kind of sector. And so what we're trying to do is to make sure that the investment that we back up is responding to a trend that the citizen wants. And this is where the link is with the cities and the smart cities. So of course, currently we are seeing an influx of the population in Europe, where there's a growth in population given the current geopolitical situation, and the cities are challenged to innovate to address those challenges. And with that respect, we see a lot of investment in mobility, in urbanization, in making sure that the way we live is sustainable through innovation in PropTech, for example. So we see in all segments of society significant investments and that we are trying to back up. So all in all, I would say, healthcare, sustainability, social impact, digital transformation are areas that we see needing an influx of investments. Now, just to come back on the unicorn that we are kind of debating today in this panel, we do not actually find unicorn as being a key performance indicator. From an investor perspective, we're looking at IRR, we're looking at multiple on cost, we're looking on return on investment, not the valuation of the company itself. And Europe is benefiting from one very particular aspects compared to other regions, is that we have been very reasonable with respect to valuation. So the valuation that investors are getting into when investing in the European startups is very reasonable and give a potential for profit or for multiple on cost. Now, one of the challenges that a lot of SMEs have in Europe is with respect to becoming international. And this is where the attractiveness of the region in the UAE and in Abu Dhabi in particular is there. It represents an opportunity for small and medium enterprise to go and expand internationally, and I think also to secure maybe some potential financement of the next round of financing round. So I think all in all, there are some sector, there are some geographical challenges in Europe, and there's some opportunity for international expansion in other regions.
Great, thank you. Now, on the mention of key industries to invest on, like mobility and healthcare, my next question is to Mr. Bruce Armstrong, Group CEO of Aspen Medical, and you're a leading player in the healthcare sector today, and you're managing a team of over 6,000 people in over 22 countries, and you've started up in more than 22 countries, so you know what a startup is because you've done it 22 times in 22 different places. Now, in your point of view, how would you approach and advise startups to approach risk management and to assess the economic outlook of markets to expand into before doing so in order to really achieve scalability and growth and not be a reason for the company to actually lose some of its traction due to ungoverned and unregulated growth?
Yeah, thank you very much, Omar. And thank you for picking up on healthcare as one of the industries to invest in. I absolutely agree with you. And I might just also, before I answer the question, say to President Wang, I also agree with him. We can, as companies, change the world. We can have a positive social purpose to everything that we do. And I think that's extremely important. Healthcare, my experience, which I'll base this on, sorry, I'll just get a bit away there, is that Aspen Medical, although we're quite a established company, we are still a startup in many of the regions that we're going into. And as part of our strategic plan, we are diversifying across service lines and across regions that we're investing in. And in those new regions, of course, you've got to act just like a startup. And, we talk about risk, and I sometimes say to my team and my board, even though I'm the Chief Executive Officer, I really feel like I'm the Chief Risk Officer, because it's you must be considering these all of the time that you're doing your plan. I think the important thing when entering into a new market is it's a very simple one. You must have a plan. And so you must spend a lot of time on your plan. You must inform yourself on the market you're going into, who you are going to be competing with. And you've got to come up with constantly with RFIs. So you're refining and planning, but then you need to execute. And you need to make sure that you are absolutely executing and by measuring what you're executing on so that you can get the best possible outcome from what you are doing. I also would mention on this how to mitigate those risks. Of course, you can also look to diversify, which is what we do. So we have a number of different service lines when we're entering new markets, and so after we do that planning, we make a conscious decision about which of those service lines we are going to invest into that particular region. I think also I'd say to everyone out there, be patient. You've got to invest. We're in the UAE for our particular journey just here for probably 4 or 5 years before we got our first major contract by partnering to establish the National Ambulance Company that started off here in Abu Dhabi and is now operating across 6 of the 7 Emirates in the UAE. And that's a sort of, if you're investing and you're patient and you have a plan and you're executing on that, you can get those rewards will come back to you in time. Thanks, everyone.
Great, thank you. Now, back to the entrepreneurial side of discussions, to Mr. Rodrigo, CEO of Innovating. Now, as a leader of a company that's been growing over the past 3 years exponentially now, and you're basing your technology on advanced artificial intelligence algorithms, and what you really do is very important to startups. You're connecting the ecosystem together. So you're helping entrepreneurs connect together, you're helping them connect with corporations, with the government, and you're using technology to address that. So from your point of view, and while operating in the market in the past few years, how do you see, how can we build an ecosystem for SME owners and startups to grow? So what are they looking for? What are the insights you found that they really needed, the challenges that they had to pass through? And how can technology address that in a way that would build an ecosystem for SMEs and startups to grow faster and easier?
So first of all, thank you very much for the invitation. It's a pleasure to be here, and I think Abu Dhabi is creating the hub that the world needs to connect the investors, technology, and companies. So for me, the last 3 years have changed a lot because we came from the 2021 year with a peak of investment, $0.7 trillion invested in startups, and last year it reduced to $0.5 trillion. This is changing a lot the way of the startups are growing, because some of them are changing from B2C to B2B. Some of them are changing to creating technology and SaaS products. Why? Because B2C is quite demanding in terms of marketing, investment, and some of them are pivoting their business to that. But this is another opportunity. Why? Because these B2B companies are going to be able to scale. It doesn't matter the market you are, because when you are a B2C, you need a big market, a local market. When you're a B2B company, you can be more scalable and you can create easier a unicorn. If we see, for example, the activities, 20% of the investment came or went to fintech. So fintech is going to be still one of the major companies or activities that are going to raise capital, followed by health tech. And probably there is something that is going to be a common technology that is going to be the artificial intelligence. What we have seen in Finnovating, we are using artificial intelligence, we are using GPT technologies, and just 3 months we are able to create, for example, our own GPT for business, just in 3 months. Why? Because the way you can access to the technology right now is amazing, it's going to change everything. So in the next 2 years we are going to see how a lot of business models is going to be reinvented just using the artificial intelligence in the right way. On the other side, answering your question about what we can do if we are investors, government, corporations, to help the SMEs and to help the companies, what we have seen in the platform, and we are following and tracking a lot of interactions between companies. For example, in the last 12 months, we had more than 15 million interactions in the platform. And follow all these interactions, we see that the most important thing is why or how you are able to connect with the right partners, the right companies. On one side, it's important to create platforms that we are doing, to connect the whole ecosystem, but on the other side, it's quite important to create the support of the governments, the public sector. Why? Because at the end, you need to help your companies to scale abroad. You need your companies to connect to the right investors, and also you need to attract companies to your country. And this is quite important how you are going to manage in the next months. Why? Because there is an amazing race between countries. We are working with some governments, with public companies, that all of them want to attract companies. All of them want to help their companies to grow. And it's going to be an amazing race of which country or which city is going to be the hub of innovation, the hub of raising this innovation. And for me, probably the key is to help the entrepreneurs to grow their business, not to put any kind of barriers, because for a CEO, it's quite complex to create this magic that I mentioned before, that no one is doing. So please leave them to do it, help them with the resources they need, and obviously also to attract the talent to be able to do it. That's for me the secret sauce. So is that's my vision, and also I would say to advise to all the governments and the investors to help to attract the talent and help them to grow and fulfill their dreams.
Perfect. So on that note, and from taking away the barriers that face entrepreneurs, I'd like to come back to Mr. Amin Salam. So for startups to become unicorns, in so many cases, they need to expand cross geographies. So enter new markets, find new opportunities, and scale their scope of work. And I want to hear from your point of view, how can actually governments attract these startups, attract foreign direct investments from foreign startups, and how can they reduce these barriers that face their way once they enter the market and start operating in a completely different, sometimes culturally different type of market?
Sure, absolutely. Now, certainly, I mean, if we want to call it like stage 2, first of all, we know how challenging it is in the industry to get to a unicorn success story. However, from a government perspective, when you get a number of companies that are, whether they're domestic or international, that do get to become a unicorn amongst many others that they had an edge over. 3 factors are very major for any government. If you are incubating this company that turned from an entrepreneur into a successful company, into a unicorn concept, technology, regardless in which sector this company is engaged. If it's a domestic company, first of all, you need to create, as we said, the right environment to launch this company into the global economy. This requires a lot of work, because to provide this platform, if you want to brand it as a, let's say in my case in Lebanon, if you want to brand this unicorn as a Lebanese unicorn, there's a lot of work to be done. From the government's perspective, you have to invest heavily in creating this, if I want to put it in the context of exporting your human capacity power through this group, through this unicorn that your country incubated and grew to a unicorn, you have to have a very strong external program for startups in collaboration with sister cities or sister governments or countries. In the case, I can give you a small model. In the case of Lebanon, we do have solid foundations and exchange of technology to support unicorns that are incubated in Lebanon or unicorns that are collaborating from the global market into Lebanon with a number of countries. The UAE happens to be one of them. Due to the ecosystem that's heavily invested in the UAE, we have managed to have a lot of collaboration with Lebanese startups that are working in the UAE, and they are being able to engage with the Lebanese economy, whether to grow within our economy or to grow from our economy into the region. The US is another market. Today we're working as well with Saudi Arabia to put the right platforms in place, with Qatar, a lot of new initiatives with Europe and Asia. But as a government, the most important thing is to have those bilateral platforms that are really hand-holding those unicorns into the global economy, hand-holding them and directing them into the right countries where they can flourish. We've had a lot of companies within the tech industry, for example, that created solutions for real estate that were incubated in Lebanon, and then we managed to take them to the US market, and they boosted their businesses there. They grew up in a very fast pace, and now they are some of the top companies in the US that work on real estate solutions. So the government has a major role, and it all relates really in the relationships and bilateral agreements between each government and the other government. But it's not an easy task. It requires a lot of work, and those entrepreneurs and those unicorns really look up to their governments to provide them with those platforms. Unless you provide them with those platforms, you are basically leaving them alone, floating, and this is a big loss on any economy. If you don't handhold your unicorns, they will fly naturally into any other economy, into any other country, and they will be adopted very fast if they are successful concepts in the technology arena, and they will be a big loss for the economy. So any government that is seriously looking to boost its economy through startups and later stage unicorns has to really handhold them very closely, protect them, and work on those bilateral platforms to take them globally, protect their IPs, give them the right structure, and boost them in very tight agreements with different countries. Otherwise, you don't own them, you will not be able to embrace them, and you will never be able to label them as made in Lebanon, for example, or any other country. So there is a major responsibility for any government to really handhold and embrace those companies, to be able to take the best advantage of them and help them flourish in the global market.
Perfect, thank you. Now, we've got only a few more minutes left, so my next question would be to Mr. Mehdi again. So you've been operating for a while now, and like we were talking during the panel, growth is always value driven. So it has to be consumer centric. You need to offer something that's centered around the end user, the citizen in many cases, and you need to empower the startup with the proper ecosystem, starting from the government to the investors and all of that. So what are the possible ways for startup owners and SMEs to measure the value that they're giving to their end users? So it's always an iterative loop of optimizing the operations and optimizing the functionality that you're able to help the consumer with. And it's a never-ending loop. It's an infinite loop that companies have to constantly operate in and make sure that this value is improving over time. So what are the KPIs, the measures, how can they get that feedback from the end users in order to make sure that what they're offering actually has the potential of growing into becoming a unicorn?
Yeah, Hello? Yeah. It's a very good question. So, I would say that there are three elements that are the cornerstone of the startups and how they can grow fast. First is technology. What we are talking about today is a paradigm shift from how things used to be done and how things are done or will be done. Human beings are useless in some processes. Human beings make mistakes, take time, they sleep, they eat, and they cannot follow up large levels of data. For this, the startups are bringing the algorithms, are bringing artificial intelligence, are bringing these meta softwares that are able to do what used to be the human job to be done by the machine. It's typical technological progress that we are seeing here at play. And we are very lucky today because our generation is living this exactly how our ancestors lived it when they first discovered the engine that will allow to replace horses, when they got electricity that will enlighten cities instead of having somebody come in and lighten up every single lamp in the streets. This is really what we are witnessing today, and this is technology. The second step is flexibility. As you correctly said, today customer has raised the bar on what he or she wants and how things should be served to him and to her. And therefore, the only way to be able to serve this client is through hyper-personalization. All of us got the experience of going for men or ladies to a tailor in order to make a suit that will be exactly tailor-made for you. This process of personalization takes time, takes effort, takes human time, and may not be perfect as one could want it to be. Today we have the technology that is able to personalize big concepts, generalize things into every single individual. And this is the type of personalization that the end customer is looking for. And third is the funds, is the investment. Something that His Excellency said just earlier on how to foster this ecosystem. A lot of things, regulation, funds, but more than that, what do Arab export? Energy, sometimes transformed energy, labor force, some agricultural products. Today, we are living a generational shift whereby a group of 20 people equipped with laptops can bring in a new technology, a new tech stack that can be exported to countries that embrace technology and who on paper are advanced. When I look at my team and I see the collaboration that they have developed among themselves and among also software developers at the other side of the universe, from US to China to India, this is the revolution that is empowering the startups. And today, the Arab world, and I can say it here, we have labs, we have R&Ds, we have software developers who are building products that can be exported. And here comes the play for the governments. Do we want to import technology forever, or do we dare export it? Making a unicorn, building a unicorn from the Arab world cannot happen only within the Arab world. There has to be a stage at which one of the milestones will be to export and to go and conquer the rest of the world. May it be Europe or China.
Perfect, thank you. So my next question to Mr. Nathan. So when we're speaking about helping companies grow and achieving the $1 billion landmark, so there's always a huge difference between the way startups operate and the way SMEs operate. So there are different dynamics. So startups, they always seek hyper growth rates. and they always seek getting the largest market share possible within the least time frame possible and all of that. And on the other hand, SMEs, they take a more consistent approach towards growth, smaller steps, but over the course of time, they achieve certain KPIs that would be a bit safer, but also would help them reach their end goals. So my question to you, as someone who invests in investors, so you fund venture capitals, what are the key differences first between both types of businesses in terms of the investment point of view? So what are the key metrics that investors should look when investing in a startup versus when looking at an SME? And how can we help both reach the same end targets of achieving hyper growth rates in the shortest time frames possible? And I'm speaking here from an investor point of view.
Yeah, thank you for the question. I think the question is addressing a common challenge that SMEs and startups have, which is the financing part. And I think the differentiator is about the type of financing you will obtain from investor or banks, whether you are a startup or an SME. So a startup usually doesn't qualify for loans. So it's very difficult to finance a startup with debt. So what happens is you're looking for an equity partner, so a venture capital investor, to jump into your company and take a participation, an equity participation in your company. When you're an SME and you are a bit bigger, a bit more established, less risky in nature, you can make some bankers comfortable in order to obtain a loan to finance your growth. Now, it's true that financing your growth through a debt solution is much slower than financing your growth through an equity solution. So for that, you have different kind of approaches and different type of instruments available for financing those different type of growths. Now, we have, if you follow a company over its development and you look at the startup will usually go and have a first type of financing through friends and family, then institutionalize itself, go to venture capital, and then go and check for growth financing with larger checks, and then eventually get to this kind of stage where they can go into an IPO and be successful in their journey. An SME is more like a steady growth. So we could imagine that an SME is a company that is maybe less risky in nature and will steadily grow with a steady revenue by having a loan and then maybe then offering some part of equity and then becoming a large